In a new Spark project, let's open up this FBX and drag it in. We can actually just drop it into the viewport, and that'll automatically populate it in the scene. We'll also need a face tracker. And first off, let's just position this overall shape. So I'll select the whole model, move it down, and it looks like it's probably a little big. I'll scale it down and we'll see how big the face mesh is when we build that. Now we're going to put the face mesh in one of these joints as a child. So we can just right click kind of wherever, add a face mesh. Well, I guess it'll drop it in there. But eventually we need to twirl these down. And I think we want it to be probably locked to this joint. So we'll put it as a child to the neck. And let's see if this is the right size. It looks like the face mesh might be a little small. So if I just scoot it out of the way, there's me. Yeah, so it looks like it could be about twice as big. So I'll reset the scale of the worm back to 1. And then the face mesh, I'll just increase the scale of as well. And we want it to be kind of in the center of this hole. And we'll have to adjust this as we go, but this is a good starting point. So for the material of this face mesh, let's add a new material with the face mesh selected. Then double click that and rename it to matte face. We'll change it to flat for now. And we need to pull the face texture out of here. So let's grab the face tracker and click the texture extraction little plus icon. And that gives us this texture down here. So back in matte face, we'll change the texture to that face tracker texture. So there I am. Obviously the eyes and the mouth are open. So in the face mesh object, let's turn those off. And obviously it looks a little weird when I move around because this isn't rotating, but we'll add rotation into the joints. So hopefully that'll look better pretty soon. Let's actually do that right now just so we can get a better sense of how this is going to move. So we'll be rotating the chest and the neck. So we'll add a patch for both of those. And we're going to use the head rotation to control these. So we'll drag in the face tracker. So to give us more control, let's drag out this 3D rotation and add a multiply patch. Change that to vector 3. And let's just see what happens when we plug these directly in. Actually, it was working pretty well. And with these 3 values, we can change the intensity of the rotation. So changing it to 2, you get a lot of extra flexibility, definitely too much. And it looks like the x-axis probably needs to be the smallest value because as I'm looking down into the microphone, it's way too bent over. So maybe just 0.5 in the x. And I kind of like the idea that you can really twist it, but maybe not quite that far. So let's try 1.5 in each of these. I think the Y rotation might be a little too much too. I'll just change that to 1. That way the Z axis you get a lot more tilt, but then the Y axis isn't too crazy, and the X axis is even more chill. So now that I have this set up, I'm realizing that this mesh, or this model, is going to be way too big. So let's just scale this way down and drag this up. Now you can actually see yourself and the worm. It's already looking pretty good. We just need to work on the materials and add a few effects and the background. So let's start with the material for the worm. By default, it brought in this one, which is flat. So we'll change that to physically based. And I'll rename this here, matte worm. And I need to pull in all the materials that we exported earlier. So we have the color, normal, and the ORM. And we can delete this one that it brought in. And I'll turn off compression for these since we already crushed them with Crushy. And in the worm material, I'll add the texture, which is color, the ORM, and the normal. And to make sure the ORM is working, we need these sliders to be all the way up. Then in environment, we'll turn that on and just grab something from the AR library. Because this is a sand worm, we want something kind of sandy. And courtyard night or courtyard would probably work because they're a little bit warmer. I'll try courtyard night. Yeah, I like that. There's a nice warm cast on one side and it's kind of cool on the other. Now you can see the back-facing polygons are transparent, so we need to change double-sided to on. Now let's work on the face and get that a little bit more integrated. So we need to add some sort of darkness to the edges just to kind of fade that out and add some fake shadow. So in the matte face, we'll click this dot to add a patch. Then we'll grab our face texture. And we need to make a gradient. So we'll right click, add a gradient. Then we'll add a gradient step to give us a little bit more control. And we just want to multiply the gradient on top of the face. So we'll use a multiply patch. And we'll take the, I think, RGB of that, and then the output of this. Maybe RGBA. I guess this output includes alpha. And we'll just drop this in. So right now you can see it's dark on the left side because this is set to horizontal. We'll change this to circular. And we need to swap the black and white. And already that's looking pretty good, but I think it might be a little too dark on the edge because this is kind of flat black and this is kind of a mid-level. So for this new color, we can go somewhere in the middle there. And this black thing here is my microphone. If I move up, it looks better. I guess I can just move the microphone down a little bit. And now you can kind of see here, there's a gap between kind of the back of the polygons because we cut out all that extra geometry on the inside, but now we're left with a little bit of a hole here. So a quick and dirty way to fix this would be to add a sphere. So I'll go to the AR library and just grab a low-res sphere, not the high-res one. And with that sphere, I'll just drop it inside of the face mesh. That way it's locked to my face. And I'll drag it down. And we'll just kind of use this as an occluder in a sense. And we can flatten it in this direction just by scaling it. And then we can widen it up so it kind of fills that width. Just want to make sure it doesn't clip out. And then for the material on the sphere, we'll change it to flat, just so it's always one color. And what we can do is just grab the color from in here, a dark brown. And just like that, we pretty much fill that entire hole. I mean, if you look really steep in here, you can see it, but yeah, I mean, it's a pretty good fix. I guess if you wanted, you could either move it forward or scale it a little bit wider, but I mean, that works good enough for this. So now let's add a background to this just so we don't see your head behind this. So I'll right click in the focal distance and add a canvas. And then we'll add a rectangle inside of that. And we'll fill the width and fill the height. And we want this to obviously be behind everything, so we'll drag it all the way above the worm. And then we'll make a material for this rectangle. Double click to activate it. Now, first of all, under the advanced render options, we want to turn off all the depth information. That way it's always going to render first because it's first in line. So even if I'm behind, you can see when I lean back, I go behind the layer, but it doesn't actually render behind. So we should be set there. Now this material, we don't want it to use the lights, so we'll just change it to flat. And it looks like that undid these options, so we have to toggle these off again. And we're just going to have it be kind of a sandy color, so we can just darken it up and click kind of in the brown area. And if you want, you can use a 3D background. You can put objects or mountains back there, but we're focusing more on the worm for this, so do whatever you want there. I'm just going to take a second and rename some of these just to stay organized. And if you have this default environment texture, you can delete that since we're using the courtyard night. Now I'm going to add my classic fog or dust material to add some kind of particle fog to this. So I'll right click in focal distance and add a particle emitter. And I'm just going to be lazy and just rotate it here and move it over. And we'll change it to align. Make sure it covers the whole height. Looks like 1 should be ample. Now the particle lifespan needs to be a bit longer. And we want it to be pretty windy, so we can change the speed from 0.2 to maybe 0.5. And we can have a lot of variation in this, so maybe change that to 75. And we're going to be using that smoke texture that I always use, so we'll increase the size of this quite a bit. Looks like maybe 0.2 will be big enough. And as usual, I'll change this tilt to 0, and then the randomness to 999. And then the spin to, let's say, 150. And I'm going to pause this because it's a little dizzying to watch. Now in the material, let's make a new one. Double click to select it, and then rename it to matte dust storm. We'll change the shader type to flat. And then for the texture, I'm going to grab my smoke texture. So now we've got some smoke happening. Let's turn down the opacity quite a bit. And instead of white, let's also make it kind of a brownish color. And right now, I mean, billboarding is set on, so no matter where I rotate, they're always going to be facing camera. But right now, the emitter is right at 0 in the z-axis, so it's kind of right on top of the user. So to make it more of a wide area, let's actually change it from line to plane. And then this plane can be, I think 1 by 1 might be enough. So that way you can see they're emitted behind and in front of the focal plane. So you get some nice foreground dust and background dust. And already that actually looks really good. I don't know if I would change anything more on there. You can always turn on the alpha tests just so that these might overlap a little bit better because it clips out the corners where there's no alpha.